Fimmvorduhals is a hiking trail that passes through some of the most dramatic scenery in the country. I'm talking volcanoes, mountains, glacier rivers, unbelievable. And I've hiked a lot of beautiful hiking trails in my life, and nothing comes close to Fimmvorduhals. Hey Team Iceland, welcome back to my channel. This week I am so excited to bring you part 3 of my Highlands planning series. If you're an avid hiker, then you are going to want to highly consider the next few minutes, because the hiking trail that I'm about to talk about is going to be really tough to beat. And if you're coming at the right time of the year, then I can't suggest enough adding this to your itinerary. So let's get into it. So basically, Fimmvorduhals is a hiking trail that runs between Skogafoss and Thorsmørk. So the starting or finishing point, depending on where you are, starts at the top of the stairs at Skogafoss, and then you hike through 3 parts and then you land in Thorsmørk, or vice versa. This hike is not for the faint of heart. In fact, it covers a distance of 25 kilometers or 13 miles. The average time to complete the total hike is between 8 to 12 hours. So this is a pretty challenging route. I wouldn't recommend this for just your average person, but likely if you know what this trail is, then you're gonna know how to be adequately prepared. As you're hiking through this wonderful trail, you are gonna pass 26 waterfalls, 2 volcanoes, and 2 glaciers. What even is Iceland? It's crazy. One thing that I want to talk about that's super important in planning this trek is when to go. The best time to hike Fimmvorduhals is between June and September. Anything out of this window, then you're gonna probably run into more snow or rough conditions than you would like to have. Although those months are during the summer, don't let that fool you. As we've talked about on this channel, temperatures during the summer are not warm, especially for this hike because you are going to be passing an actual glacier field. Warm clothes are definitely needed for this trek. Let's talk about the trail itself. Part 1 is actually called Waterfall Way. This is the series of 26 waterfalls that I was talking about. And oh my gosh, you guys, if you love waterfalls as much as I do, then you need to do this hike because it's absolutely amazing. Like Skogafoss is beautiful, but then you have 26 other waterfalls behind it that almost rival Skogafoss. It's crazy. It's literally crazy how beautiful this is. Now, I will say that part 1 is what took us the actual longest to hike because we were so amazed with how beautiful the scenery was that we kept stopping along the way to take photos. So do plan for this during your trip. When you get to the bridge where it crosses over the river, that is where part 2 starts. And once you get across the bridge, the landscape literally changes. Like, it's so drastically different. You are gonna feel like you are walking on the moon or in the middle of a crazy volcano lava field, but that's because it is. This is also the part where you're gonna be walking between the 2 glaciers. So you're gonna be able to see, theoretically, if the weather is good, Eyjafjallajökull and Mýrdalsjökull. Also, this is when the weather starts to get insanely bad. So even if you start with good weather at Skogafoss, you are going to be walking over a glacier field and the weather can get really intense here. So unless you have perfect conditions, good, I really hope you do, but during this time we had terrible weather. In the first part of the hike, I was sweating. In the second part of the hike, I was putting all of my layers on and all of my waterproof gear. So definitely have to be prepared for layers and waterproof during this part of the trek. Also, as we were walking over the glacier field, I really felt like crampons or yak tracks would have been a great idea to have in my pack because it was really tough to walk across the snow. And we were kind of trying to walk a bit faster because the first part of our hike, we took extra time. So we were trying to make it back at a certain time to catch the bus. And so I felt like it would have been nice to have extra grips on my shoes. And I did see a lot of people that were walking with hiking sticks, so that probably would have been helpful as well. Now, Fimmvörduháls, as the name of the hike says, actually means 5 cairn trail. And a cairn is a basically a marker that shows you where the trail is and where you need to go. Thank goodness there were cairns along this part of the route in particular. So because the weather was so terrible, we could barely see across the ice field. So it really did help to watch where those cairns were and to be able to walk towards them. Otherwise, you could easily get lost. So really pay close attention to the cairns during this part of the trail. Towards the end of the ice field is when you'll come to the two brand new craters called Magni and Modi. These craters were actually formed during the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull, and it's pretty cool because you can take just a short detour off the trail and look into the craters if you have some extra time. The last portion of part 2 is called Kattahryggur, or the cat's spine. So this is technically the crossing between part 2 and part 3, which is like the ice field over to the area of Thorsmörk. This cat's spine is really intense. It's quite scary because you are on this path that's about this big, and then the path goes straight down into nothingness. So you do have to be really, really careful during this part. And of course, just take it slow, be safe. So if you weren't completely overwhelmed with how beautiful part 1 and 2 was, part 3 is gonna blow your mind. This is when you're getting into Thorsmörk. I would say one of my favorite parts of this whole hike is when you get across the spine and you come to the opening and it's just like, oh my God, this is what you see in the photos of Thorsmörk. It's just absolutely beautiful. Make sure to take some time when you get to this part just to admire down into the valley and into the glaciers, because shortly after this overlook, then you're gonna start hiking downwards into the valley, and then you won't be able to see everything as well. So just because you reach the entrance of Thorsmörk does not mean that you are almost finished. There is a solid steep descent down to get into the valley, so your knees and your toes are really going to be feeling it during this part. Like I said, just make time to enjoy the scenery around you. So all in all, you guys, the hike, while it's absolutely beautiful, breathtaking in every way, this is not for the faint of heart. I did talk about the cat's spine, but that's not the only challenging part of the hike. The ice field is grueling. There's a part where you have to hold onto a chain that's anchored into the rock. I mean, there's definitely some challenging parts of this hike. I just wouldn't recommend this to anyone to do. I definitely say you have to be a pretty equipped hiker. You have to have the gear with you. You have to be comfortable with being on your feet and hiking for around 10 hours. So just keep that in mind. So for after you're finished with the hike, like I said, you have a couple of options. Number one, you could stay in Thorsmörk. You will actually get, so you end at Básar Base Camp, which is one of the main base camps in Thorsmörk, and that is where you could get picked up from a bus, or you could stay at the base camp. So they have tent and bunk accommodation depending on what you have with you and how much gear you have. Note, if you do want to have that bunk accommodation, make sure to reserve that well in advance because there's not many spots and they fill up fast. And then also you could take a bus out. So you have Reykjavik Excursions, Sterna, and Treks, all companies that are running routes out of Thorsmörk, and then they drop off at Seljalandsfoss. The bus ride takes about an hour and it's about 4,500 kroner per person. Another option, you guys, is if you want to do Fimmvörduhals, but you don't want to do it in one day and have so much hiking and just cram it in, there is a mountain hut that's halfway between Thorsmörk to Skogafoss. It's a small hut, like literally it's a mattress on the floor. You're going to be in an open room, sharing accommodation with other people, but it is possible to do it that way. Again, this books up really far in advance, so if you are interested, make sure to book that well in advance, and I will put a link in the description below so you can get a look at that. In terms of routes and how this trail can be approached, there's a couple things. So first of all, you could start at Skogafoss and end in Thorsmörk, or you can do it the opposite way. You could start in Thorsmörk and in Skogafoss. You could do the first third of the hike, so you don't have to do the whole trail. You can start hiking in Thorsmörk and hike as far as you want, turn around, come back. Or vice versa, you can start in Skogafoss, hike a ways in towards the waterfalls, and hike back. So definitely don't feel like you have to do the whole trek if you don't have time. And as a really, really cool bonus, you could add the Laugavegur trek onto the end of this route. So if you don't know what the Laugavegur trek is, we're gonna talk about that in another video, but it's another hiking trail that goes from Thorsmörk into Landmannalaugar. You guys, talk about some of the most breathtaking scenery literally in Iceland. Oh my gosh, this would probably blow your mind in terms of how much beautiful scenery you are seeing at one point, but note that the Laugavegur trail is 4 days long. I mean, approximately. You can do it faster, obviously, but usually people are breaking it up into several days, so hike away, friends. So let's talk about how to get there, because this is the most confusing part about this trek. When I did it, I went with a group of people and we actually took 2 vehicles. We departed out of Reykjavik, which you could do, but we left really early in the morning, so I would highly suggest actually staying closer to Skogafoss, if not right next to it, so that you can just get started right away in the morning and you don't have to worry about going into the evening hours or worrying about bus schedule. This is where things get a bit tricky. So if you're driving yourself and you only have 1 vehicle, then you have to park, obviously, where you're entering. If this is Skogafoss, like we did, then remember, you're gonna be hiking into Thorsmörk, and then you're gonna need to find a ride out of Thorsmörk. Remember, Thorsmörk is located into the Highlands, so it's on an F-road, so you can't just have someone pick you up or walk out or anything like that. So you will need to get a bus transportation. Whether you're going in or out, starting at Thorsmörk, you need to have transportation for that. The confusing part comes because the buses that run from Thorsmörk drop off at Seljalandsfoss. They don't drop off at Skogafoss. And you're wondering, why, Jeannie? That doesn't make any sense. I don't have the answer. That's just how it goes. You can get picked up at Seljalandsfoss, driven into Thorsmörk, dropped off at Thorsmörk, and then hike the Fimmvorduhals trek ending in Skogafoss, or you can do the reverse, which is where you would park at Skogafoss, hike the trek, end in Thorsmörk, and then need to get a vehicle out of Thorsmörk. That's how it works. So remember, Treks, Sterna, Reykjavik Excursions, those are the companies that you're gonna wanna look at, and make sure to check the timetables, because sometimes if it's getting too late in the evening, then you might not be able to make the last bus, and you don't want that. The day that we were going, the last bus I think left at 6:30. We were really pushing it in the last 2/3 of the hike to be able to make it back in time for the bus. So just be aware of this. From there, you're either gonna have to hitchhike back to your car, or if you were able to take 2 vehicles, then you could leave 1 car at Seljalandsfoss and 1 at Skogafoss, and then drive back and pick up. It's quite the adventure, but once you have that all laid out, you're fine. If you guys have any questions specifically about how confusing the pickup and drop off is, let me know in the comments below. Moving on to what to bring on the hike. So layers. I can't stress this enough, layers is the most important part. You could easily start with a t-shirt on, depending on how warm it is, and then you could end soaked in, rain gear. So you'll definitely need a base layer, insulating layer, and then waterproof shell at the very least. Sturdy hiking boots are so essential, and because this hike is so long, don't buy a brand new pair of hiking boots and then wear them on this hike, breaking them in. Make sure they're plenty broken in before you embark on this hike, or you will have a lot of blisters. Hat and gloves are essential. Even though it's the middle of summer, you will need this to keep your body insulated, and especially for that second part over the ice fields. Okay, you have to bring food with you. Obviously, you are on a hike for a long time. There's no stores, there's nowhere to stop, nothing. So making sure that you have food with you. I recommend bringing salty snacks because you're sweating a lot, so you'll lose a lot of electrolytes, but also pack a lunch with you. Like I said, you're gonna be out there for most of the day, so have a solid lunch with you so you can make sure to refuel in the middle of your hike. Bring a reusable water bottle, because remember, for the first third of the hike, you're gonna be passing all these waterfalls. You're gonna be right by the stream for a lot of it, so you can easily fill up your water bottle. I also had a camelback inside of my backpack, which I used on the last 2/3 of the hike, so that would also be really handy as well. Obviously, you wanna have a backpack to stuff all of your food and your layers and your rain gear in, so making sure that you have something that's comfortable. I recommend something that has the hip strap, because it just makes the hike a lot more enjoyable so you're not really weighed down on your shoulders. Hopefully you don't need it, but bring a first aid kit. So we did have someone with us that needed Neosporin and Band-Aids because she was starting to get blisters, and it's really not enjoyable, especially if you have a lot of your hike left. Like I said about the icefield portion, hiking poles and crampons or yak tracks, they're not essential, but it would make this so much easier. And lastly, a camera. Obviously, you need to have something to document your trip, whether it's your smartphone, a camera, a GoPro, whatever it is. This is some scenery that you are going to want to document. Final thoughts, you guys. I cannot recommend this hike enough. I think it is so beautiful, and you're really, really getting to see what Iceland is about. You're seeing the power of the nature. You are just seeing some breathtaking scenery. I really, really enjoyed our time doing this trek. So my advice, do it.